Chag Sameach, K'tiva v'chatima tova, a happy and healthy and sweet New Year. It never fails to disturb and unsettle us, even shock and trouble us when we read it. It's printed in our Siddur to be read every day of the year, to bother us. On the second day of Rosh Hashana, we read it from a Sefer Torah. Rembrandt painted it, Kierkegaard trembled before it. God calls to Abraham and says, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and bring him up as a sacrifice to me on the mountain which I will show you." They go. Abraham readies Isaac as a sacrifice, and at the last moment, an angel calls out and says to Abraham, "Stop, don't do anything to the lad. Now I know that you are truly in awe of God." Abraham sees another ram caught in the bushes and offers it instead of his son. The Midrash tells us no part of this ram, the other ram, went to waste. The Midrash says, "Ha'ayel hazeh lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala." Let's think about that for a minute as we reflect on the sound of the shofar and what this ancient tale of sacrifice could possibly have to say to us in our times. Sounding the shofar is our mitzvah on Rosh Hashana. It's God's commandment to us on that special day. It's a symbol of proclaiming a king, as we discussed in connection with the first day of Rosh Hashana, particularly in view of recent events in the United Kingdom. Yet the shofar also takes us back to that moment on Mount Moriah, where Abraham found another ram, Ayil Achar, in the bushes, and offered it in place of his son Isaac. Nothing from that ram goes to waste. Ha'ayil hazeh lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. It says in the name of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa in Midrash Yalkut Shimoni. One question this asks us is, what are we called upon to sacrifice? What do we offer? Nowadays, when we hear someone talking about sacrifices or offerings, it's usually to get you to give tzedakah or to give to a foundation, which is not a bad reason, not a bad sentiment at all. Let's be clear. You'll hear more on that in days to come, when it's time for the Yom Kippur appeal. But that's not all there is to sacrifice. Sacrifice means giving something up, maybe as part of a deal, ideally in a good trade. We'll get as good as we give. Let's say, in the biblical worldview of things, we bring an offering, and in return, we're promised that we'll get forgiveness for a sin, or closeness to God, or both. When the Torah speaks about sacrifices, like the daily morning and afternoon offerings, one lamb in the morning, one in the afternoon, and a special musaf, or additional sacrifice for Shabbos, or Yom Tov, or Rosh Hashana, or Yom Kippur, we're talking about animal sacrifices as offerings to God. The Hebrew word that we translate as sacrifice is really something more rich and meaningful. The word is korban. It's a form of the word close. In other words, this is what brings us close, that is, close to God. We have interesting debates when this topic comes up in our Talmud classes. Will the Messianic era and the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem be accompanied by the restoration of animal sacrifices? Some among our number feel that this was a part of history that was necessary at the time, but will not be required in the future. Others believe it will. We'll wait and we'll see. But this whole debate pales in contrast to our discussion here. The discussion on Rosh Hashana, especially the second day, has to do with human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. What could be more primitive? What could be more horrendous and distasteful? We're against it, rightfully so. And yet, not only every morning in our prefatory prayers at the beginning of the morning service, but today, in front of everybody, on Rosh Hashana, in both Israel and the diaspora, all Jews read this portion today. We take out a Sefer Torah, we open it, and we read from Parshas Vayera, Genesis, chapter 22, about the near sacrifice of Isaac, the binding of Isaac, Akedas Yitzchak. God called to Avraham and said, "Please take your son, your only son whom you love, bring him up to Mount Moriah and offer him up there." Ultimately, the sacrifice, as we said, was not about Isaac, but about another ram, Ayil Achar, suggesting that the provenance of this particular ram was something special, for many reasons, not the least of which is that from this ram, nothing went to waste. Ha'ayil hazeh lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. The Midrash wants us to understand that every component of this ram that Abraham offered in place of Yitzchak, Isaac, his son, was used for something. Not just anything, not just something used, but for a very holy and lofty purpose, an essential building block in the universe, in the development of humankind, without which we could not imagine our world. The ashes of the ram, which Abraham offered in place of his son, were the foundation of the altar in the temple in Jerusalem, the place where atonement for the Jewish people was achieved for 930 years. The place of this drama of the Akedah that we read is Har HaMoriah, Mount Moriah, the same place where, centuries later, the temple was destined to be built. So the ashes of this ram were a central feature of this central place in the world. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. The sinews, the tendons of this animal became the strings on King David's harp. Can you imagine a world without the Tehillim, without the Psalms of David, the beautiful and moving songs which David HaMelech composed and played using his harp? Can you imagine a world without the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want? Can you imagine a world without Ashrei Yoshvei V'secha, happy is the one who dwells in thy house? Or the other 148 Psalms that are a part of our life and our prayers every day. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. Nothing goes to waste. The pelt of this ram is the cloak of Elijah the prophet, of Eliyahu Hanavi, herald of the redemption. So when every Saturday night we sing Eliyahu Hanavi, Bimheira v'yameinu yavo eleinu, speedily in our days arrive and announce already the Messianic era. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, will appear to us adorned in this cloak made of the pelt of this ram, ha'ayil hazeh. Nothing goes to waste. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. And the horns of this ram, so very much on our minds at Rosh Hashana as we hear the sound of a ram's horn, maybe the horns most of all. One of the horns was a little smaller, one was a little bigger. The smaller one, from the left side, was the shofar that sounded at Mount Sinai, Kol Shofar Chazak Me'od, as the revelation of God and Torah took place before all the Jewish people, freshly delivered from slavery just weeks before. We all heard the sound of that shofar, which was the left and slightly smaller horn of Ayil Achar, another ram that Abraham offered in place of his son. And from this ram, nothing went to waste. The right horn, the larger one, we have yet to hear. The Midrash says it's being kept at the ready under God's throne of glory, under the Kisei HaKavod, and will be sounded to announce the revelation of the Messiah. As we'll say in Musaf on Rosh Hashana, the words of the prophet Isaiah, V'haya bayom hahu yitaka b'shofar gadol. On that day, a great shofar will be sounded. This shofar from this ram will be heard on this great and awesome day, when the full purpose of the world and everything in it is revealed to us in the Messianic era, when suffering is gone and sickness and fear are barely memories, and swords are beaten into plowshares, and nothing goes to waste, meaning we will suddenly understand that everything has a higher purpose to fulfill. Ha'ayil hazeh lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. From this ram, nothing went to waste. If it was all ultimately about the ram, why go through this whole thing with Isaac? To make Abraham bind up his son, to take out the knife and be ready to slaughter him, to make a human sacrifice out of him. Why? When you read the Medrash, you read about the tears of the father falling and mixing with the tears of the son, and your own tears of fear and anxiety fall and mix with theirs, as it should be. Where are we in all this? Are we with Abraham? Are we with the ram? We're right there with Isaac, with the knife at our throats. It's for us to identify with that anxiety, that anticipation of the unknown, of what is supposed to happen. And like Isaac, we are saved, delivered at the last minute, the last moment we survive. And nothing from this experience should go to waste. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. Each of us have felt imperiled, in danger at some point or other in our lives, for the most part. Some of us lived through the Holocaust years, though most of us know that only indirectly, through the testimony of others, what it was like to feel the knife at the throat of the Jewish people like that. Others of us came from other lands. When life there became untenable, we left and found calm and peace here. We've suffered through various kinds of life-threatening moments. The dark cloud of illness has hovered over our lives. And yet, in these past couple of years, we've all sensed, secondhand, if not firsthand, what it's like to have the knife at our throats. This pandemic that 2 years ago had no vaccine and no certain prognosis, no treatment, and very little information even about how contagious it was, threatened us all enough that we stayed locked down. We didn't travel, we didn't shop, we didn't come to shul to daven, we didn't get to celebrate simchas in the way that we're used to. I'll never forget that Shabbos right before lockdown when the doctors among our minions said, "You know that by next Shabbos the entire city will be in lockdown, right?" With more than my usual dose of skepticism, I said, "Come on, really? What would that even look like?" But fear, wearing the garments of caution, overtook us from that March of 2020 onward, 2.5 years ago, rightly or wrongly, justified or overblown, to make us fear for our lives, at very least, to fear for our health, and retreat from life in a way that we hadn't done before. The past 2 years, we had to hide from COVID. Maybe it was like the Blitz in London. Maybe it was like something else. I don't know. But we haven't had anything like that in a long time. To feel danger in such a way, the knife at our throats, to take such extreme measures that we felt the hand of death, life-threatening illness coming at us. We weren't sure, from our groceries, from the mail, somebody sneezing. Mercifully, we were spared. Most of us know someone who was not. Ayel Achar, another offering in place of Isaac, his son. Now we have to ask, what remains with us from the last 2 years of being bound on this altar, not knowing what would happen? We have to say, Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. Nothing from this experience, from this chilling and isolating and anxiety-ridden moment in our lives. Okay, it was 2 years. And for some it continues on because of compromised health or whatever. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. Nothing should go to waste. Having gone through this, we should appreciate with great depth of feeling that life is finite. I used to think that only old people died, because that's all I knew. Then a classmate in elementary school died. Then a friend in middle school died, and I wondered, how could it be that young people could die also? I began to get a sense that life was more finite than I'd imagined. The losses that we've suffered in the past couple of years place that reality on our doorsteps, in our laps. Nothing from this experience should go to waste. It follows that we have to know with so much more sincerity how precious our days are. It follows that we should appreciate so much more how friends are tremendously important. We've looked in on one another, literally if we're in the same building or street, and digitally or electronically around the world. We've managed to keep in touch and keep connected with one another. We've learned the place that community has in our life, particularly this precious community, a shul, and all the people who daven together, certainly on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, but also throughout all the days of the year. For several stretches, we weren't able to. First, our ability to gather was very limited. Then more of us could come to shul, but with restrictions and screening and distancing and masks and all that. What some viewed as a chore, I have to go to shul, we now recognize as a gift, a high point, a bright moment in our lives when we can sit with friends and share true common purpose and ask for our needs from the Ribbono Shel Olam. Nothing from what we have just gone through should go to waste. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. We've been called upon to sacrifice a lot in the past couple years. We've answered the call because we had no choice. We gave up our theater tickets, we gave up our symphony tickets, our lunches out. We gave up the Seder with family and friends. We gave up sitting with friends who were mourning and comforting in their grief. We gave up attendance at weddings of grandchildren, bar mitzvahs, traveling to Florida. Well, some of us. We lived in the anxiety of the unknown. How would this story end? What would happen? If we didn't feel the knife at our throats with the same intensity and immediacy that Isaac felt on Mount Moriah, or his father Abraham, not knowing what would happen next, let's recognize that the sacrifices we did make sacrifices, and recognize that although we gave up some things that were important or valuable or even precious to us, the point was not in the giving up, but in the coming close. And if we heed the call of this Medrash, this Yalkut, that nothing from the experience should go to waste. Lo yatsa mimenu davar levatala. That will give us the insight and the courage and the strength to make of this year still better friendships and connections, a renewed dedication to being part of shul life regularly, a stronger drive to make our closeness to God real and tangible and something that gives us life and strength. As we resolve to redeem the past 2 years, to make good things come of it, to make sure that nothing from our experience goes to waste, we pray and we trust and we know that we'll all be sealed in the book of life for good, for a Shana Tova Umetuka, a happy and a healthy and a sweet year. Chag Sameach.